The V-173 aircraft. It was the Flying Pancake, an odd yet intriguing experimental test aircraft developed for the World War II American Navy fighter program. The all-wing discs that were the wooden V-173 and its all-metal successor, the XF5U Flying flapjack, which was 5 times heavier, were intended to theoretically have a large lift advantage. 2 piston engines that were hidden inside the body propelled the aircraft using propellers at the wingtips. Thousands of Americans saw the unusual design while it was being tested in 1943, which sparked widespread suspicions of a UFO invasion. Make sure to stay tuned until the end. Hey guys, welcome to another amazing video from Aviation News. Today in this video, we'll be talking all about the V-173, also known as the Flying Pancake. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon to make sure you never miss any updates or videos from us. That said, let's have a closer look. Military innovation peaked during World War II, especially in the field of aircraft development. Technology for rocket and turbojet propulsion has advanced. The development of new flying wing types, fighter types, reconnaissance aircraft, and multi-engine bombers. The globe gained success after success with vehicles thanks to American and international efforts, some of which were incorporated into a commercial flight. The American Navy frantically looked for the ideal all-purpose fighter during the beginning of the 1940s. For the United States, the Pacific War was of the utmost importance. In order to defeat the Japanese Imperial Army, it was essential to maintain superior naval and air power. The Navy was looking for a plane that it could launch from tankers, cruisers, and other ships to engage Japanese submarines and kamikaze aircraft. The aircraft would need to be able to take off and land practically vertically in order to meet such ambitious deployment goals. Since 1933, Charles H. Zimmerman had hoped to show off his V-173 aircraft design. He was able to realize his idea thanks to the Navy's involvement. His initial concept resulted in an essentially spherical platform for the airplane. He sought strong engines and big propellers, but the latter never really materialized. The major objectives was to create a plane that could hover while at rest or at modest speeds. Furthermore, he set out to reach the high speeds of conventional airplanes, although this goal was never fully accomplished. In the aviation sector, Zimmerman was well known for his innovative ideas. He had mostly worked for both the National Aeronautics and Space Administration and its Forerunner. His design appeared to be created for the requirement for aircraft that could operate from carriers. After receiving an invitation from Eugene Wilson, the business's then president, he joined the aerospace company VOUGHT in 1937. He conducted a demonstration using a radio-controlled small-scale prototype to pique the Navy's interest in his idea. His full-scale model in wood and fabric for experimental testing was the subject of the contract. The American Navy and Marine Corps had received many interesting aircraft from the United Aircraft's Transport Division, but probably none were as unique and experimental as the Flying Pancake. The F-4U Corsair, one of the best carrier-ready fighters flown during the Second World War, was among their earlier creations. Charles Zimmerman served as the team's senior designer when the program first started in 1939. He was certain that maintaining constant airflow over the full wingspan, including the fuselage, would allow for simple takeoffs and landings at low speeds while enabling high-speed operations. The Navy was thrilled about the possibility. The plane's informal moniker comes from the fact that it was built with a flat disc-like body that was frequently compared to a pancake. The powered propellers were at the leading edge, and 2 piston engines were concealed in the fuselage to the sides of the cockpit. The peculiar layout offered high-angle landings and takeoffs with varying speeds. The wing had a complex empennage consisting of 2 rudders, 2 huge midcraft elevators, and 2 horizontal stabilizers and elevators. Some have compared Zimmerman's design's overall appearance to that of an alien spacecraft or a sea monster. Manta rays have been linked to Zimmerman as a possible source of inspiration, but this has not been substantiated. The fact that the entire body created lift was one of the most effective features of the novel design. According to the Dryden Flight Research Center's Associate Director of Research, in this scenario, the V-173 truly is a flying wing. You end up with a really substantial gyroscopic forces because the propellers are so large and are spinning at not insignificant speeds. As a result, it begins to behave somewhat more like a helicopter, or in more contemporary terms, a V-22 Osprey. The way this particular aircraft functions would be completely familiar to V-22 guys. The V-173 or Flying Pancake is a small 1/4 of the plant-size aircraft that VOUGHT produced. This prototype had a symmetrical aerofoil section and was composed of wood and canvas. It weighed 3,050 pounds, which was only a quarter of the full-size plane's original weight. 2 80-horsepower Continental A80 engines from the F-4U Corsair were used to power the propellers on this lightweight test aircraft. Eventually, modified three-blade propellers took the place of the original propellers. The aircraft's diminutive tailwheel and fixed undercarriage gave the nose a strange 22-degree tilt. Before flying, it underwent thorough wind tunnel testing. A total of 131 hours were spent testing the airplane prototype. The full-scale model gave the necessary proof that Zimmerman's predictions were largely accurate because it could do quick takeoffs and landings and travel at high speeds despite the little engine's insufficient power. Unfortunately, it underperformed because it couldn't stop or manipulate into a spin. On November 23, 1942, it made its first flight under the direction of VOUGHT chief test pilot Boone Guyton. Even though the first flight was short, 13 minutes, valuable information was gathered. The complicated transmission that sent engine power to the two long propeller shafts instantly caused issues. The most significant of these problems was the severe vibrations that were produced during ground testing, and which had already required engineers to postpone the first flight for several months. Its subsequent test flights were followed by allegations of UFOs from locals in Connecticut due to its peculiar look. Guyton and well-known American aviator Charles Augustus Lindbergh conducted the majority of the 190 flights that made up the testing that took place between 1942 and 1943. Lindbergh would later remark that the plane was wonderfully simple to fly and had excellent low-speed performance. By winning the Orteig Prize in 1927 for his continuous flight in the single-engine monoplane Spirit of St. Louis from New York City to Paris, France, in 33.5 hours, Lindbergh rose to fame. The pilot had to make an emergency landing at a Connecticut beach during one of these test flights. He noticed two people who were out having a good time in the path of the airplane as he got closer to the ground. On landing, the pilot locked the brakes in an attempt to avoid colliding with them, but this caused the plane to turn over onto its back. However, because the airframe was so expertly put together, it didn't receive any significant damage, and the pilot was perfectly unharmed. On March 31, 1947, the experimental plane made its final flight after 131.8 hours of flight time. Although construction on the first Flying Pancake prototype was still ongoing, the Bureau of Aeronautics asked VOUGHT in January 1942 for a proposal for two prototypes of an even more experimental V-173 known as the VS-135. The VOUGHT XF5U, an expanded Flying Pancake constructed of metal that is 5 times as heavy as the original, was created in response to the request. Two 1,600 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2000 radial engines would power this upgraded version of the Flying Pancake. The design and metal construction were intended to retain a low aspect ratio with low takeoff and landing speeds and high top speed. A wing with such a low aspect ratio would typically perform poorly. There would be a lot of energy produced due to the high air pressure underneath the wings and the amount of induced drag that would result. In more traditional aircraft, drag is produced by the wingtip vortices themselves. Building a wing with a high aspect ratio, which entails making it long and narrow, is the typical solution for reducing the impact of vortices. Unfortunately, such a configuration has drawbacks, including a loss of maneuverability and a reduction in roll rate, as well as the near impossibility of creating a long wing that is structurally stiff. As a result, VOUGHT looked for an alternative strategy to address the vortex problem. By turning the propellers in the opposite direction of the vortices, they were able to eliminate the drag-producing tip vortices. The goal was to keep the air below the wing at a higher pressure. By reducing the drag created in that fashion, the wing's structural strength might be increased while maintaining excellent mobility, allowing the plane to fly with a smaller wing area. The torque-reducing counter-rotating propellers of the original wood and cloth V-173 were not the same as the propellers created for the all-metal fighter. They were created using cyclical movement, much like a helicopter's main rotor. It was able to move the center of lift and down to some extent as a result, which helped it maneuver. The ejection seat made it possible for the pilot to escape the aircraft in an emergency without being hampered by the propellers. The final version was meant to have a combination of cannons and machine guns beneath the nose, whereas the prototype was unarmed. VOUGHT's prototype was unfortunately finished at a time when the Navy's interest in jet-powered aircraft over propeller-driven aircraft was growing. The XF5U concept appeared promising, with good maneuverability and high speeds of up to 550 miles per hour, but the project was ultimately shelved. By 1946, the project had run well over budget and into the allotted period for completion. On March 17, 1947, the Navy officially ended the Flying Pancake program. The original prototype, made of wood and canvas, was moved to a museum for display. The two new XF5U had been mostly finished, but one of them was having vibration issues even though it was being utilized for ground runs. Without the plane ever taken to the air, their taxi test turned into trial hops. Despite being regarded as finished, the other XF5U never received its finishing touches. The airframe of the finished and tested plane was so robust that a wrecking ball was required to bring it down. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Let us know your thoughts on Flying Pancake in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Aviation News, for more such exciting aviation content.